right, so today we're finishing our missions emphasis for 2022. And at the end of the service, or end of this message, we are going to be collecting these cards. And so I want to encourage you to fill one of these cards out. So I'm going to get 4 men. Is Frank around here? And go ahead and pass those out, one to each person here, and we'll do that. And so I want to start with an illustration as they're passing these cards out. So this week I had a conversation with Jordan Gassman, and he asked me, we were talking about construction. I in my previous life, construction, I worked construction. In my previous occupation, and for many years, I built big high-rises in the Washington, D.C. area before God called us into ministry. And he asked me, he said, do you ever miss that? And it was kind of like a yes and a no answer. I miss some aspects of it because, and the one aspect that I can really relate to is the team aspect of throughout the entire job of maybe that's a year or 2 years. There's so many people that do small things really well. They do their part. And without the totality of everyone's effort, that could never happen. And so, like for instance, the building or the superintendent of the construction company that's building it, he's really important. Like he could build a case that I'm the most important person on the job, because like without him scheduling things would be out of sequence, and you would be in each other's way, and it just would not go well. And so that man or woman, she could say, I'm the most important person on this job. But in reality, that one person could not build the building themselves. The same way with, you go any one of the trades, like for instance, an electrician, he could say, or she could say, hey, I'm the most important person because if this building does not have power, there ain't nothing going to happen in here, right? And I was an engineer, so we made sure everything was in the right place and at the right elevation, and I could build a case like, yeah, we're the most important because if the building's not in the right place, it's going to take a lot of money to put it in the right place. And so, everybody, but it's not about just one person. It's the collection of everyone's efforts that makes something that we can't accomplish by ourselves happen. Helen Keller said this. She said, alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. And so this morning I want to talk to us about this idea. And we have 17 global partnerships with families around the world that we help them accomplish what God has called them to accomplish. And we want to talk about this from Acts chapter 16, because in Acts chapter 16, there's Paul and his team of missionaries. They're out there making it happen. You're gonna see in this passage that there's a lot of things that resemble what our missionaries, what happens to our missionaries and what they experience. And so we're gonna draw from that, and we're gonna answer the question: how can we be great global partners in the gospel by faith? And so let's look at this passage, Acts 16, starting in verse 11. It says, so setting sail from Troas, we made a direct voyage to Samothrace and the following day to Neapolis. And from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in the city some days, and on the Sabbath day we went outside the gate to the riverside where we supposed there was a place of prayer. And we sat down and spoke to the women who had come together. One who heard us was a woman named Lydia from the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple goods, who was a worshiper of God. And the Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was said by Paul. And after she was baptized, and her household was as well, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay." And she prevailed upon us. Okay, so talking about three things here this morning. How can we be great partners in the gospel by faith? The first one is we can faithfully pray for our global partners. Prayer is not the least we can do for our global partners, but it is our most powerful act of love to them. Write that down. Prayer is not the least we can do for our global partners, but it is our most powerful act of love to them. See, in this passage, we can see several reasons why we need to faithfully pray for our global partnerships. And I'm just going to give us several reasons just right out of this passage. They are faced, first of all, with many decisions to reach people. You see in verses 11 and 12, it says, "So setting sail to Troas, we made a direct voyage to Samothrace, and following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is the leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in this city some days." There's a whole lot of decision making in that process. In fact, if you look at the few verses before that, you're going to see that Paul had the Macedonian experience where he had the vision where he wanted to go to Asia. He wanted to go east, but God stopped him. He wanted to go north to Bithynia, but God stopped him. And then he had a vision. God gave him a vision, and that vision was a man saying, "Come to Macedonia." And so they went. And there's a lot of decisions that was in that to make that change in direction. And this is good because a lot of times all this decision making really helps us to really focus and to desire God's movement in our life, His direction. And it helps us. So this is good for missionaries to have this. But facing these decisions sometimes really drain us of energy. And so when this past 3 years, when the hunters were in South Africa, they were faced with so many decisions. Like they had a health crisis back here in the United States with a family member, and they had to make decisions. So what do we do? Do we go and be with this family member? Do we stay on the field? And they had all these other things, like they had to make decisions. Like just coming back recently, they had to make decisions, not based upon their own preferences, but basically juggling two cultures. They have the culture back here with all their partner churches and their families, but then they have the culture that they live in on the field in South Africa. And so they had to make this decision. And Kinley had starting first grade. And see, because they're on the other side of the equator, it's the opposite. Their summer is different from ours. It's the opposite. It's in the winter. They switch them. And so she's starting first grade, not in August, but in January. And so they have to do all this arranging and making all these decisions based on all these different things. And that's why we need to constantly keep them in our prayers. They also have doors closed on them often. Paul wanted to go to Asia, but God stopped him. He closed the door. He wanted to take his team to Bithynia. God closed that door. But he opened a door for them to go to Macedonia. But for that to happen in our lives, you know that whenever we experience closed doors, how do we feel? How does that work against us? And they just have to figure it out. They had to figure it out, and our missionaries had to figure it out. But that also, they could get very discouraged that a door has been closed that they thought was previously open. And so we need to pray for them. Our global partners, the Comptons, were in Lima, Peru for many years. And they, at COVID, they had to come out of the country. And then they were faced with they couldn't get back in the country. And it just became a closed door. And so now they are in Tijuana, Mexico. And we need to pray for them. We need to pray for God's direction in their lives. So when they receive that closed door, they just don't decide, well, God closed this door. We might as well just go home. It'd be so much easier if we could just do this where it's more comfortable. But no, we need to pray for them. The Depew family, you don't know them yet, but it's the family that's going to come alongside of the Hunters in South Africa. And we need to pray for them because we love the Hunters very much. And maybe we can take them on. Maybe we can have 2 partnerships, missionaries in South Africa. But the Depews, to get to this point to where God is redirecting them, they had to have 2 doors closed on them. One, God stopped them from going to China, and then he stopped them from going to Taiwan. It can be very discouraging. And then also they have to wait upon the Lord's timing. Paul had to wait on the Lord's timing. You see in verse 12, we remained in the city some days. Now we don't know how long they waited. Maybe if they got there on Monday, they had to wait to the Sabbath, which is Saturday. We don't know if it was just days or weeks of days. But that waiting on the Lord, you know how it is yourself whenever you have to wait on the Lord for something. It wears on you. It's like some sand in your shoes. It's okay for a little while, but the longer that happens, you just got to stop and dump your shoe out, right? So we want to pray for them so the Hunters, they were waiting on the Lord to provide another missionary couple that would come alongside of them, and that looks like it's going to happen. And so all glory to God. And the Shafsmas and the Fioris, they're in Milan, Italy. And we've been praying alongside of them for quite a long some time about this big evangelistic campaign that they wanted to do. And yesterday it happened. Yesterday, we don't know exactly, I haven't heard the reports yet, but they had an arena there in Milan, a sports arena, and they probably had 8,000 to 10,000 people that they got to share the gospel with. But they had to wait. They had to wait on the Lord's timing, and it can be very, very discouraging when you see something that you think might happen, but yet you have to wait. You have to wait. When it gets rescheduled. And so we need to pray for them. They also have to make educated guesses to reach people. It says in verse 13, and on a Sabbath day we went outside the gate to the riverside, where we supposed there was a place of prayer. And we sat down and spoke to the women who had come together. So this indicates that there was no Jewish synagogue in Philippi. You had to have 10 men, 10 Jewish men, to have a synagogue. They weren't chauvinistic at all. Doesn't matter how many women they had. These women had no synagogue, so they went outside. But Paul, knowing that there was no synagogue there, said, okay, but there has to be someone. And the normal way of operation was they were going to minister to Jews first and then to the Gentiles. So they just went to a synagogue. No synagogue. Where would we go? They made an educated guess. Where would they be meeting? Well, apparently it was some type of normal thing that if you didn't have a synagogue, you went out by the river. So they were out by the river. This could have been another closed door, but it was not. They found some worshipers. But they had to make this educated guess. And Bethany Dick, we had her last week, wasn't she an awesome pleasure to have? What an amazing testimony. And what an amazing educated guess that she has. She wants to reach street kids in Manila. I mean, it's an educated guess that she's going to open a feeding center. And she knows logically that if you meet somebody's physical needs, then you can possibly earn the right then to meet their spiritual needs. But that may not work. I think it'll work. And when she gets there in January, she's going to hit the ground running and going and working out this educated guess. And so we need to pray for her that God does an amazing work through her. And then we see here also that some accept the Lord, but some reject him. In verse 14, it says, one who heard us was a woman named Lydia. There were several women there. Only one accepted Christ at that moment. The one who heard us was a woman named Lydia. You know, it's not easy when you see somebody reject the Lord. It's awesome. It's awesome to have this testimony of Lydia being reached. But what about those other women? They rejected. Our global partner missionaries need us to pray for them as they experience this rejection, that they don't take that upon themselves and get discouraged. And then lastly, in this part of it, they faced imminent dangers at times. The next part of the story, if you were to read further on down here, you would see that they ministered to another young lady. She was demon possessed. And she made her living and the living of others through telling fortunes. And this young lady accepted Christ, and she could no longer be in that business. She would nor she want to be in that business. She was no longer demon possessed because the Lord and the demons can't possess the same area. And so they were the people that were profiting off of her. They didn't like this very much, so they threw Paul and Silas in prison. See, our missionaries are faced with this imminent danger. We have partner missionaries in Pakistan. You think it's just all fun and games over there. No danger there, is there? They could be faced with more than imprisonment for just sharing the gospel. And so this is, exactly what happened here with Paul, and we need to pray for our missionaries. See, prayer is not the least we can do for our global partnerships, but it is our most powerful act of love for them. So, I ask you this question. I ask myself this question. This is for me too. if their staying on the mission field was dependent upon my prayer alone, your prayer alone, how long would they last? 3 seconds? 3 minutes? 3 hours? 3 days? 3 weeks? 3 months? 3 years? 3 decades? First, we need to be a great global partnerships. To be great global partners in the gospel, we need to faithfully pray for our missionaries. And then secondly, we need to faithfully encourage our global missionaries. For all the reasons that I just mentioned above in the previous point, our global partners need to hear from us and encourage them. I have to admit, this is an area that I am going to improve in. And I've noticed that if I want to improve in any area of my life, that I have to focus on it. And so there's several ways that we can know what is happening in our partnerships, worlds and lives and in ministries, and then let them know that we are with them. The first way is there's letters on the missions display in a binder. And that's there for us. Any of you can go to that binder and you can read their latest letter. We ask them to send us letters, correspondence, to help us understand what they're doing and going through and what's happening. And so you can go to that and you can read those. You can see the people that they're reaching. There might be pictures on them of the things that they're doing. But take the time to get to know them. And then maybe reach out to them. We get to kind of like a window in here. This was kind of like a letter. This is a letter, right? In a sense, it's Acts, God's sharing us a story. But imagine this was like part of Paul's missionary letter. I mean, it's a letter to us. But say this was a missionary letter that Paul was writing back to the church of Antioch, because Antioch was a church that sent Paul and his missionary team out. And can you imagine in that letter you see Lydia and her whole family got saved. Glory to God. Doesn't it make you feel like, hey, we're partners in this? So I encourage you to write to them, return their letter with a letter, or write them a card, just maybe briefly, hey, we're with you, we're praying for you, we love you. And then there's also social media. Most of our global partners use social media, and this can be a great place to actually use social media for good. But we can see what's happening in their world a lot of times, and we can message them. This could actually be a great thing that you did with your family. Maybe at the dinner table, before or after dinner, or breakfast or lunch, I don't care. And take a prayer card, pull it up on your laptop, show the kids, like this is our partner missionary. They're sharing the gospel where we can't. And so we're going to pray for them. And we're going to write this card and we're going to encourage them as a family. Letters, social media, emails. You can email them. I think all of our global partners have emails. And they get there a lot faster than letters. We can actually maybe share what God is doing here. The people that get baptized, and show them a picture of maybe the outreach that we did, or of whatever, the kids' Christmas program. But we need to show them that we are with them and that we care about them and that we take interest in them. And then there's the Christmas card connection. The Christmas card connection is coming up very soon, but we send each one of our partner missionaries several cards, Christmas cards. And the more people that participating in it, the better it is. And sometimes they get it in February. That's okay. One missionary said, we were blessed to have a Christmas card in February. So we can show them that we care and that we're interested in them in these ways. Let's look at Romans chapter 13. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. That's a great promise. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Verse 14. How then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him in whom they've never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. We could extrapolate that out, that idea, and we could think, how will they be encouraged unless I encourage them? So I ask this question. If they're staying on the mission field solely dependent upon me or you, their encouragement, how long would they last? 3 seconds? 3 minutes? 3 hours? 3 days? 3 weeks? 3 months? 3 years? 3 decades? The Cindy's in Athens, Greece, have been in this building project for several years. I don't know if you've ever been in a church that's had a building project, but they're not very fun. And even before COVID, there was a struggle with the government. And at times it looked rather bleak that they would even get these projects. There's 2 buildings. But they've scheduled now the grand opening in March of 2023. And great things that God has done. All glory to God. We prayed alongside of them, it seems, for so long. And now it's actually happening. They could have been really discouraged by that. But they persevered. And to the glory of God. So we can be great global partners in the gospel by faithfully praying and encourage them. And lastly, we can, by faith, financially support our global partners. Now, if you're looking for the bricks that you were going to throw at David last week, I replaced them with foam bricks. So you won't be able to throw them very hard and they won't hurt. So we're given this amazing gift to give financially by faith. Now, this is different. And we can help our global partners live out their God-given calling to share the gospel with people in another nation, or maybe it's in this nation, but very focused. And we look at what Lydia did. This is a great thing, and sometimes you miss this in the story here. But Lydia, it didn't take her long after she accepted Christ to put her new life into action. And look at this, it says this, and after she was baptized, her whole household as well. She urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay." And she prevailed upon us. Yet it didn't take her long to discover this heart of hospitality, generosity, and support for missionaries. She used her resources, the resources that she had, to support missionaries. She invited this missionary team to come and stay with her. Now you think, well, that's no big deal, like they stayed a few nights. No, they would have stayed for several weeks, maybe longer. And if Paul left anybody behind, maybe they stayed with her. You see, this is a huge financial undertaking for this team, because this meant in this culture that you would not only put them and take care of their greatest need, which would be housing, but you'd also feed them as well. And the housing situation in the first century in some of these Roman cities was not very good, would be very expensive, would not be very wholesome or clean. And so this was huge to these missionaries. And these words here that she says, and that Paul decided to write as he was inspired by God, and she prevailed upon us. There's force that is implied with this statement. Now, I don't think that she threatened them in any way, but she wasn't going to take no for an answer. She wouldn't have it any other way. She urged them and she convinced them. And so she had this new life in Christ. And she insisted that this new life in Christ would count for something. One of the greatest ways that we can make our lives count for something and be much bigger than what we can do on our own is that we would support our global partners faithfully in giving. Faith is the key to this type of giving. There's three different types of giving if you look throughout the Bible. The one is that we always talk about is tithing. But tithing is different than faith giving. There's tithing, there's offerings, and there's by faith. And does anybody know what type of offering or where the first offering takes place in the Bible? Well, let me answer that. Genesis chapter 4. We actually learn about this. We can read it in Genesis chapter 4. But it's when Cain and Abel brought their offerings to God. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 4, it tells us, it says, "By faith Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts. And through his faith, though he died, he still speaks." It's because of the faith of that offering that we're even talking about it today. Pretty crazy. Abel was the first ever known offering by faith. It was long before it was commanded by God. Faith giving. 2 Corinthians chapters 8 through 10 talk a lot about this faith giving. And in fact, Paul used an example, the Macedonians, as his illustration of this faith giving, this sacrificial giving that they were doing. So the first offering was by faith. We are saved by faith. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, "For by grace you've been saved through faith. It's not of ourselves. It's a gift of God, not a result of works, lest anyone would boast." And then we're secure in Christ by our faith. 1 Peter 1:5, "Who by God's power are being guarded through faith for the salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. So we're secure. First offering was by faith. We're saved by faith. We're secure in Christ by faith. And we please God by faith. Hebrews chapter 6. For without faith it's impossible to please him. Whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who diligently seek him. So we please God by faith. And we can give by faith. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 3. It says, for they gave according to their means. He's talking about the Macedonians. This is his big illustration for these chapters. As I can testify, and beyond their means, they didn't just give from what they had, but they gave beyond it. How did they give beyond what they were capable of? It was by faith. And then verse 12, it says, for if the readiness is there, so that's basically meaning that if the heart is right, if the heart is ready, God is supreme. I'm grateful for my salvation. If the heart is ready, or if the readiness is there, it is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. So he's not saying that you're going to give something that you don't have. Like some cults, they have convinced people that Jesus is coming back. So just put everything on credit card and borrow a lot of money because he's coming back on this day and you won't have to pay it back. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about you don't have it, but God can give it by faith. He will give it. Not that you can, I got more. I can be more comfortable. No. So he gives it so that we can give it away. That's God's economy. It works. And he's never failed anybody yet. Ever. I love singing that song. Verse 15. Chapter 10 of 2 Corinthians, it says, we do not boast beyond a limit that in the labors of others, but we hope. But our hope is that as your faith increases, our faith needs to increase. As our faith increases, our area of influence among you is greatly enlarged. So the greater our faith is, the more work God can do in us. But look at this in verse 16. So that we may preach the gospel in lands beyond you. That's what it's all about. He's commanded us to reach people in the lands beyond us. How do we do that? Well, these three chapters say by faith. By faith. See, giving by faith is different than tithing. It's different. Tithing helps us to make sure God stays on the throne of our lives, that he is most important, that nothing else is of a greater love. We're prone to worry. We're prone to give our lives away to stuff that doesn't matter. And actually, tithing can help us do that. And tithing is 10% of our income off the top before anybody else gets anything else, including, as David said, the government. And giving to missions is by faith, is above the tithe. So I got a slide. So here's an example. If we make $2,500 a month, then we times that by 10%, it's $250. And you may be thinking, well, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could trust God with that. And see, faith differing is different. You would say, you're going to take and you're going to commit to God will supply for in your life for $15 a month. 15 plus 250 equals 265. That's your total commitment. I stopped at Dunkin' this morning. This is about 4 of these is about 15 a month with all that poof on top. That's it. 4 of these. It's really not a lot. But it's pretty amazing what God can do when we trust him by faith. So if you're not trusting God, with your finances by tithing, what your first goal should be today is to trust him there. Because see, tithing is not so much about what we can do for the church. It's about how we can stay realigned with God, to stay lined up and keep him our main focus in life. And so I want us to give by faith, but your first priority today, if you're not tithing, is to commit to God to tithe. And then you can make a commitment. I don't know, 4 of these or 8 of these or 16 of these per month. Whatever that is. But in the end, it's us giving what God has led us to give by faith that he will give. Not that we can have more in our life, but that he can send more people to where he wants them in this world. So, think about this. We are a church with many, many years and even centuries of missions giving. I literally sit on the shoulders of many, many pastors that have emphasized missions over and over, year after year, and we've sent out missionaries to different parts of the world and even from among us. A great heritage of missions. And 17% of our missions, or all of our 100% of our missions come from 17% of the body. And I'm very, very grateful for that, because this 17% has allowed us to support 17 missionaries for about $1,800 a year. And because of the faithful giving, the faith giving of 17% in 2020, we were able to give our missionaries during a tough time. We were able to send them $500 extra bucks. And you think, well, that's not very much. Yeah, I wished it was 5,000. I wish it was 50,000. But in actuality, if every one of their churches did that, $500, maybe they have 20 churches supporting them. That's a pretty big, what is that, $10,000? That's a nice bonus. When was the last time you got a $10,000 bonus? Never. But it's the 17%. The 17% we enabled us in 2021 to actually give a raise to the ones that we had. We had a group of missionaries that we were supporting for $1,200 a year, and we were able to give them a $50 a month raise, and so that means they get $1,800. That's how we get to $1,800. We were able to give all of those missionaries a raise because of the faithful giving of the 17%. See, alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. Now, play this along with me. What if that 17% was 25? Could we have 25 works throughout the world? I mean, if another 8% gave like the 17%, we could have 25 works throughout the world. Play along with me. What if 50% of our church body got involved in missions at the same rate that the 17? Could we support 50 works around the world? And you're thinking, oh, you must get a percentage. You must get a bonus for getting more people to sign up. Like, no. I get nothing. I do this for the glory of God. I do this so people will hear the gospel. What if 100%, 100 works, 100 missionary families to the glory of God? He can do so much. We can, by ourselves, can do so little. But when we come together, we can do great things for God. Now, I'm just going to make this really simple. I know I'm not talking to simple people. I know that, so please forgive me. But I'm just saying $15 a month is not that much. What if we had 10 people that said, I can give by faith for 15. I can sacrifice 4 of these. That's one missionary that we've supported for an entire year. Then if you say, okay, if there's 20 of you that would either give 15 more than what you did last year or give 15, or maybe start giving 15, we could support 2 missionaries. That means Bethany Dick, when she hits the ground running in January in Manila, we could be a part of that because we don't support her yet. And I hope by God's grace I can make that phone call and say, hey, Bethany, would you be our partner? Or maybe the Depews, the couple that's going to come alongside the Hunters. Remember there's them 2 weeks ago, the Hunters? They need some help. It would be awesome to have 2 couples in South Africa. Or maybe it's the Maliks that we're going to be having in February. Maybe it's them that we could be able to say, hey, man, even before you come, we're going to support you. Because we need somebody in Peru. Our partner missionary, the door was closed there. They stayed through COVID. And God's doing a great work. It would be awesome if we could take them on.